very special welcome to Life Matters. I'm John Fahey. A very special guest today, former ambassador to the Vatican, Ray Flynn, as well as being former mayor of Boston. Ray, welcome to the program.
It's great to be on Life Matters again, John. I always enjoy my visit here.
Thank you, Ray. Ray, I've got a few questions today. We're going to talk about several things, and both of the topics you've become quite proficient with, and you've talked to the media about, and would like to talk to you about that today. Ambassador, I recently saw you on Catholic TV talking about the Vatican International Conference on adult stem cell research. It was a meeting with world scientists and medical experts at the Vatican, and they were talking with the Pope. You've become somewhat of an expert in this particular area. How did you get involved in this?
Well, it's an interesting question. How that happened, John, is I have a grandson, Braden O'Doherty. He's now 8 years old. He was born with a rare neurological disease, undiagnosed. I've had him everywhere, National Institute of Health, talked to various experts, different hospitals across the country, and they can't diagnose what the problem is. And he has difficult walking, can't talk really. And which led me to doing a tremendous amount of research. And I discovered that the Vatican, no less, was very, very active, the Catholic Church, on adult stem cell nutrition research. And I communicated to the Pope, who was a friend of mine, and the Pope invited me to participate in this first International World Conference on Adult Stem Cell. 400 of the world's top scientists and medical doctors participated in this conference at the Vatican. And it was a whole week. I had an opportunity to really learn firsthand, to meet all these experts, including a scientist named Christian Japot from Canada, and who has still, to this day, working with me, trying to develop an awareness so I could communicate and represent this point of view, not only on behalf of Braden, my grandson, but on behalf of the thousands of families like Braden who are suffering from this rare neurological undiagnosed disease. And it has great, great, great potential of helping people in distressed injuries. That's why I'm so involved in it.
You also have a personal stake in this, of course.
I certainly do.
And people at home, that are home watching, and many other people don't understand there's a difference between
Correct.
Adult stem cells and also embryonic
That's correct.
stems. Explain a little bit
Well,
about
that's
that.
a good question. Embryonic stem cells, of course, means you extract the stem cells from the embryonic.
The embryo is destroyed.
Yeah, the embryo is destroyed. Of course, I'm strongly pro-life.
Right.
And so I'm opposed to that, but the Catholic Church is strongly opposed to that. But the world, John, has not learned to distinguish between adult and embryonic.
Embryonic.
So that's why the Catholic Church has been in the forefront of this whole issue. So they oppose embryonic stem cell because it's the taking of innocent life.
Right.
But they are very, very much in the lead on adult stem cell, which has great potential, particularly reaching people with rare diseases and using your own stem cells to regenerate into the part of your body, which would then help you restore to its original productive use.
And there's not destruction of human life as
Correct.
with the embryonic.
Correct.
One of America's leading Catholic politicians, you are one, and you still are, where political opinion, the media often seeks you out, but you're not partisan. So other than fighting for your Catholic faith, how would you describe your political philosophy? Now, this also ties into what we just talked about.
Yeah, and that's a good question. But, you know, I always say, John, even when I was mayor of Boston, I considered myself pro-life, pro-family, and pro-poor. But, John, that's not just a political philosophy. That's consistent with the teachings of the Catholic Church and my social justice theories. And, you know, when I went to the Vatican for 4.5 years and learned under Pope John Paul II, who was a dear friend of mine, and all those scholars at the Vatican, I found that the philosophy that I governed Boston with, helping the needy, helping the poor, helping families, was completely consistent with Catholic Church teaching. I knew that already instinctively because I learned this not at Harvard or Providence College. I learned this in my neighborhood South Boston. I learned it in the neighborhoods of Boston. I learned it from my family, and I learned it from my church, my Catholic faith.
And that was the program you ran on, too.
That's the program I ran on. Now, unfortunately, John, I know the next question you're going to ask, what happens to the politicians today? They don't really follow that path anymore. And I can't answer that one, because I only can tell you that even to this day, I was probably the highest vote getter in the history of Boston. And it worked for me, and it wasn't changing anything about what I believed in, or it wasn't trying to be pandering to a certain political interest. It was just my beliefs, my values, which were also consistent with the values of the majority of people of the city of Boston as well. Unfortunately, John, that's the secret, that's the silent majority that we don't hear from very much. It has nothing to do with Republican, has nothing to do with Democrat, has nothing to do with liberal, has nothing to do with conservative.
It's your faith.
It's my faith.
How do we deal with that at this point? Now, we're talking about stem cell research with the Vatican. That's an enormous plus for people like your grandson. How do we educate people to be a little more aware of this so that we can push this program forward?
Well, you know, I wish, you know, this is an important program, Life Matters, because faithful people, good people watch this program.
Right.
But John, let's be realistic. It should be on Meet the Press. We should be talking about this on Meet the Press. We should be talking about this on CBS, ABC.
And you do go on these programs.
I do that, but not enough, because there aren't enough voices like ours that have this kind of knowledge, experience, training, and determination to get these issues on the forefront of the national debate. I would debate anybody, anywhere on these issues, and quite frankly, I think they're very popular as well, although we don't hear that in the national media. So the people are there, the people are consistent, the people have their faith. Unfortunately, the enemy in many respects is the media, because they're not covering these kind of points of view.
On Catholic television, you talked about your grandson and stem cell research, of course, but that's Catholic television,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who watch that program already feel that way.
That's correct. That's correct. You know,
And it's a secular world that we have to deal with.
that's what we have to deal with. We have to educate, particularly the young people, John. I'm going to devote the rest of my life here to try to reach young people. That's why I accept speaking to various groups. I was in Florida last week, as well as speaking on 9/11 in New York and New Jersey on that anniversary. And I have an opportunity then to talk about issues important to my values, my faith, social justice. So, you know, it's a lot of work. It's tedious, it's arduous, but nevertheless, these kind of voices need to be made, not only in national media, but somehow, John, we have to get it into the movies, because so many people watch these young people are impressed with these movies, and we need to get back to basics and values.
In the last couple of years, several Hollywood productions, Noah being one of them, and family-oriented motion pictures have been enormously successful, both not only in the theater,
Yeah.
but also on television.
Well, you critique movies,
That's right.
and I've written a screenplay based on my best-selling book, The Accidental Pope. Humbly speaking, I think it'd make a fabulous movie.
Well, it's certainly timely, because we're going to talk about that in just a few
I
moments.
just don't have the access to that Hollywood crowd that I need to take a look at this. I don't want them to take something up that they don't believe in or they don't think it has great potential. I just want them to read the screenplay and then tell me it's not a great screenplay, because wherever I go, I talk about Braden, I talk about the Accidental Pope, I talk about, you know, the future of the Catholic Church, the future about people of faith. And I predicted all this in my book that I wrote with Robin Moore, who wrote The French Connection and The Green Beret, a great writer, and myself working with them. But we need to be able to reach those people in Hollywood that can make this happen. So far, just haven't been able to do that.
The book's been successful.
The book was number 4 in the New York Times best-selling list. I wrote the screenplay, but Robin died, and I don't have the contacts out in Hollywood, which is what I'm looking for.
And the book touched a lot on the Vatican. And next question, John Paul II, a dear friend of yourself, was credited with giving Poles the courage to demand change during the days of solidarity in Poland. We see similarities with Pope Francis, with the Islamic State terrorists in the Middle East, and the persecution of Christians and Catholics in the Middle East, and minorities as well. We see a definite role for Francis in today's political climate, don't we?
We certainly do. I mean, here's a man who has not only substance, but he has the ability to know how the style of the media. Wherever he goes, he just came back from Albania. And he made a powerful statement.
He's a man for the times, just like John Paul II.
Well, I think I come up with a phrase. I write for the Pilot.
Right.
And I think I came up with a phrase that I think is going to stick, probably across the world. And what I said is, Francis is a man for all seasons and a pope for all reasons. A man for all seasons, of course, Archbishop Thomas of Becket, a man for all seasons. A pope for all reasons, because of the fact that in the current crazy
political climate, everything's going on.
Everything's going on, and you need that kind of assertive, definitive voice.
You know, Ray, years ago the Pope was involved with matters of religion, of course, because he was the Pope. And as the Pope, he's the head of the Roman Catholic Church. But today, the papacy has to be involved with both the secular world and the religious world, as we see this now.
Absolutely, John. I was astonished, and I think we both have discussed this. I knew that the Vatican had moral influence throughout the world over the years. I was amazed that the Vatican, having such a diplomatic corps that extends to literally every country in the world.
You were part of it.
I was part of it, and I had the opportunity to interact, not only interacting with these ambassadors from the Vatican to the different countries, but I had an opportunity to travel to Bosnia-Herzegovina during the war. I was one of the first Americans on the scene during the genocide in Rwanda.
Oh, really?
I was the first one to arrive in India on behalf of the President of the United States and Pope John Paul II for the earthquake in Maharashtra. So I saw these incidents firsthand across the world, in Haiti during the Civil War. Unfortunately, it doesn't get the kind of notoriety. If I were a correspondent for NBC or CBS, it would have led the news.
Right.
Of course, it gets on Catholic TV. Of course, it gets in the Catholic newspapers. But it just doesn't have the same reach that
because the audience that are watching these programs are Catholics.
It's like preaching to the choir.
Right.
You know, you really need to reach those young, impressionable, good people. But they need to hear these stories. They need to hear what the church does. The general audience. The general audience. Absolutely, John.
So you've been involved with a lot of these different things as part of the diplomatic corps.
Yeah.
So this puts a different perspective on where you're coming from today.
Well, it really does. I mean, I wish I had the same experience the day that I was elected mayor of Boston, because if I was qualified to be mayor of Boston, I would be 25 times more qualified now because of the experiences that I've had in not only understanding, my instincts were pretty good as mayor of Boston, bringing the city together during the turbulent busing period of time. And I played a lot of professional sports, basketball, and we grew up in the sports environment, so I interacted with a lot of blacks, a lot of minority people, so I had that kind of credibility in the various neighborhoods of Boston.
That was an important time for you to be mayor in the city.
It was very important because of the fact that the city was divided. And if anybody...
Just coming out of the busing crisis.
Just coming out of the busing crisis, and I think if there's anything, I was probably like Pope Francis, for the right reasons, the people elect me, because I had that healing instinct about what needed to be done in Boston. That's why I'm such a strong supporter of Pope Francis, who I know very well, and I know what he's about. And that's why the Catholic Church needs to get those points of view into the center of public opinion. They can't just be considered as a religion. They have to be considered as the world's most important listening post and the world's greatest diplomats.
And not only that, but the Roman Catholic Church, aside from being the church, the spiritual dimension, it's also a temporal dimension too. It's a state. It's a political entity.
Absolutely, and they're accredited to like 150 countries throughout the world. You know, if you really, the president even said this to me, President Clinton said to me, Ray says, I want you to go there, he says, because that's where I thought I was going to be Secretary of Labor. Right. It was in the newspaper, in the magazines.
You have a background.
Yeah, I'm a longshoreman, right. International Longshoremen's Association. My father was a longshoreman, my brother was a longshoreman, Kathy's father was a longshoreman when he came from Ireland. So that was my background, working men and women. But the president understood how important the Vatican was, and he needed a person who had good credentials with Pope John Paul II, and who was respected in those circles, and even more importantly, importantly than that, was, my point of view, was consistent, even as mayor, with the teaching of the philosophy of the Catholic Church.
You had a relationship with the Pope prior to him becoming Pope, too. He had a strong association with Boston.
I first met him in 1969 at a Polish church in Boston, and visited him in 1983, 84, in the Vatican, and a number of places after that, including in New Orleans.
Boston is such an eclectic area. We don't realize that Boston probably has one of the largest Polish populations in the country.
It really does.
Next to Chicago and New York, probably.
It really does. I mean, Boston has a great Polish community. I was born in the Polish community, John. I was born on Boston Street. I was born right next door to the Polish American Citizens Club.
Across the street from St. Mary's?
Yep, St. Our Lady of Czestochowa. So you can't, there were only 3 families in the whole area, in the whole neighborhood, that didn't speak Polish as their first language. My family was one of them. And what was really interesting about it is I was born, the Hitler-occupied Poland, September 1st, 1939. I was born in July of 1939. A lot of the Polish people fled Poland, came to the United States, settled in Chicago, settled in Boston. So I was living in the community, was going through a massive transition. And so I got to know these people. They were exiles from Poland. My family did. And that's why, you know, I have to tell you, I probably got about 98% of the Polish vote when I ran for mayor of Boston, or city council, or state rep, because I had a strong identity with the Polish community, largely because of my friendship with Pope John Paul II. Mm-hmm. And even recently I was invited to participate in his beatification at the Vatican. And I spoke to all the cardinals and all the bishops. And it was fun, telling old stories about Pope John Paul II.
Talking about bishops and cardinals, the United States will be getting a new bishop in Chicago on November 18th. Cardinal Francis George has resigned. The Pope accepted his resignation, and Chicago will be getting a new bishop.
They certainly will. And you know, when I visited, I think I mentioned this, when I was representing the United States government and the Holy Father during the crisis in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Sarajevo, and we were there during the war. And I think I was there maybe 10, 15 times. Croatia was central to that whole conflict. And this new Pope, this new Archbishop of Chicago, who will soon be a cardinal, I'm sure, because of the importance of Chicago.
Blaise Supich.
Blaise Supich. I had an opportunity to talk to him about the culture and the history of Croatia. Even though he's from Nebraska, his parents were from Croatia. And so he was very, very helpful. I sat down and talked to him a couple of times for 2-3 hours over dinner, and he gave me a good background of the Croatian ex-Yugoslavia culture. So I had an opportunity to not only meet these people, but to learn from some of the best.
Now, he's going to be installed November 18th, and that's going to be important for this country as well, because the Catholic Church plays a large role in this country as well. Well,
we've been fortunate in the United States to have some great leaders like Sean O'Malley, John O'Connor from New York, another good friend of ours. But this is the first appointment, American appointment for Pope Francis. So he's going to be key. He's going to have a direct pipeline to the Holy Father and to the Vatican.
Now, he's coming from Spokane.
He's coming from Spokane, and he brings a versatility of thought, of understanding. Now, some people have been writing inaccurately, I might add, that he's a moderate. He is not a moderate on Catholic social teaching or the major issues.
And if he were, well, I think people misunderstand what that means, moderate.
Well, it's the style, John, again, when I originally said substantively there is no difference between he and Francis George.
The doctrine is the same.
The doctrine is the same. That doesn't change.
Right.
But the style is a little bit different.
Right.
Like my style is a lot different than other political leaders. I reach out to people. I want to make people feel comfortable with me and respectful.
Right, but the doctrine is the same.
The doctrine is the same. Nothing changes in terms of, we're changing our policy on life. We're not changing anything.
And I think a lot of people get confused about that. Well, the church is this way and the church is that way. No, the church is not changing its doctrine at all. The program doesn't change. The style does, or whatever.
It was amazing to me when I was at the Vatican how consistent the church was throughout the world. Wherever I would go in Africa, Mozambique, in Haiti, in Germany, in France, I mean, the church was, the teaching and the philosophy
doesn't change.
And the doctrine doesn't change, John. Because you know why? In the United States, politics is rooted in media, money, and message. In the Vatican, it's rooted in message and rooted in truth.
And there is no
truth never changes.
There's no compromise.
It doesn't change. I mean, you can talk all you want about various issues, whether we should go to war, like you know that how active I've been in the issue in Iraq,
right.
About the persecution of Christians. I wrote I think a nice article for the Pilot recently that flew all across the world.
And it was also in the Herald too.
Yeah, it was in the Herald and was in the Pilot, and I'll be filing other stories. And when I talked about that recently in New York on 9/11, I mean, the people were really interested in that topic. Regardless if you're a Catholic or regardless if you're even religious, everybody believes that it's the fundamental core values of our Constitution for the protection of religious liberty. And to see the United States government not taking a firm, decisive stand on that is inconsistent with who we are as Americans in our teaching. So there's no difference, John, between our faith and our Constitution in many respects. They're consistent with the values and the traditions of our country and the values that we all hold, even if you're not even a religious person.
Ray, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Well, when I was mayor of Boston, John, my telephone number was listed in the phone book. Probably reason people didn't call me because they said the mayor would never have his phone listed.
But you ran on a program of accessibility.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I always love to hear from people. Ray.Flynn@Comcast.net. I know other politicians don't like to give that out, but if people need to get a hold of me, Ray.Flynn@Comcast.net.
You never know. There may be somebody out there with an idea about the accidental pope.
There you go. That's what we're looking for. We're launching that campaign right here on Life Matters with John Fahey.
Anything that you want to say to our audience just before we leave?
Well, I'm just so pleased that Life Matters is broadcast to so many households in the area. It should be on national television as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how that happens. I don't know. But substantively, like Francis, it's there. You just have to be able to get, like my screenplay, you just have to get the right people to review it. You get the right people to review my screenplay and get the right people to do Life Matters. Will be on Meet the Press.
You also wrote another book, too, Travels with John Paul II.
Personal Portrait of the Pope and the Man. If people haven't read that book, they ought to read it. And it's like the accidental Pope. I talked about the first American getting elected Pope. Now, a couple of people were very, very critical, some of them in the press, saying, oh, my God, you're a bit unrealistic, Ambassador Flynn. There's never going to be an American Pope.
Never say never. Right?
Well, Francis is American, South America.
From South America.
But, and I had him, my Pope was going to be Sean Patrick from Fall River. And we noticed that he was the runner-up to Pope Francis, and he's one of Pope Francis's closest allies.
Ray, best of luck with the book, and best of luck with your travels and
Thanks,
with your
John.
journal.
Thank you. Good luck to you, John.
Thank you for watching us. For Ray Flynn, I'm John J. Fahey. Thank you for watching us on Life Matters.
Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, one of the true icons of the pro-life movement, Miss Nellie Gray, passed away in 2012. And they searched around for someone who could fill her shoes, and we think we found that person. Her name is Jeannie Monahan. Well, welcome, Jeannie.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Jeannie, could you please speak first to the legacy that Nellie Gray left regarding the Right to Life movement and the March for Life, which is really an enormous event down in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, on that, just on your final note there, the March for Life is the largest pro.
Hi, I'm Colby Mazzarella. Welcome to Life Matters, where we interview guests who protect human life from conception to natural death. Today's guest is C.J. Doyle, the Executive Director of Catholic Action League of Massachusetts. Hi, C.J., welcome to the show.
Colby, delighted to be here.
Thank you. Tell us a little about the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts and how do you defend human life?
The Catholic Action League was founded in 1995. We were the former Massachusetts chapter of a national organization, the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights. And in 1995, we became independent to concentrate entirely on Massachusetts issues. As a Catholic organization, we support the teachings of the Catholic Church in terms of protecting human life from conception to natural death. And we defend the religious freedom rights of Catholics and other religious believers and pro-lifers. We were one of the people who argued against the...
Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, today's guest is a mother of 4 children and founder and director of Northern Ireland's leading pro-life group. In 1997, she founded Precious Life after viewing a picture of a baby killed by abortion. Well, welcome, Mrs. Bernadette Smith.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm delighted to speak to you from Ireland. As a voice for the unborn child, and I know many of the listeners will be in agreement that this is a worldwide struggle and we have to unite, and I'm here to tell you about the threat to Ireland to legalise abortion.
Bernadette, can you give us a little bit of the history between Ireland, England, Northern Ireland? What's gone on and what are some significant...